The Ordinary Discussion Podcast.
In the book of Acts, you see a movement, right? Where people, they encountered Jesus, they met him, and they began to live on mission for him and with him. And then they reproduced themselves, they multiplied. And so one of the key factors in being movemental is that there is a multiplication factor in it. There's something scalable, there's something more decentralized. And a lot of people, when they think ministry, they think of, one small organization that gives something to nourish people spiritually. But really our job is to help people learn how to nourish themselves spiritually so that they can then go help others. And so everything for us has that multiplication mindset. And that was why it was a great term for us to use for a ministry name.
Welcome, Ordinary Discussion Nation. I like saying nation. I guess we are. We are across the nation. It's great. We have a quick podcast for you today with a big change in Ordinary Men, Inc., the organization. And, of course, that includes Ordinary Women as well. And I have he's awesome and awesome. I have an awesome guest with me today, Alex Rossi, which is our new Director of Operations with Ordinary Men, Inc. Gosh, it's weird.
You almost gave it away.
I almost gave it away. And so he's going to help us through this conversation. So excited to have him. If you guys will welcome Alex with me. Alex, are you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it, man. I'm so excited to share the announcement.
Yeah, why should people listen?
We have so much happening in our movement, and we believe this is just the beginning, and God is going to use so many more ordinary men and women and even other movements coming to make disciples who make disciples. Join us.
I think you may have given it away. I don't know, Alex.
It was a good hint. I feel like I set the stage.
There's some strong hints in there. Well, guys, listen on. We have a big announcement for you guys. As always, thank you so much for listening. Like, subscribe, share, do all those things. Leave us comments, questions. The more you guys interact with us on Facebook or podcast listening platforms, the more it helps us. And why does it matter if it helps us? Because we are all together, you as listeners as well. We're trying to get the good word of Jesus out to many, many people. So let's all do this together. And thanks again for being part of Ordinary Discussions. So thanks for listening and get ready for a great podcast. See you guys in a minute. Let's do this. Welcome, Alex Rossi. How are you, man?
I'm doing well from Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Yes, you are from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I am in Edwards, Colorado. So it's amazing what we can do with technology, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, Zoom is a lifesaver at times.
It is.
Yeah.
I actually prefer Google Meet. I think I'm one of the few people but I always use Zoom because Zoom allows me to record. I think I can do that with Google Meet, but I think I have to pay a lot more money or something. I don't know.
You can probably do it with Google Meet.
Yeah, probably. Well, maybe we'll go to Google Meet and get rid of Zoom.
I think it's the layout thing. Like you can see everybody easier on Zoom. It just feels easier. But I do know people enjoy Google Meet because it's already all in your Google Chrome browser and everything.
Don't talk bad about Google. I'll get those are fighting words for me. No, I could care less. Hey, Alex is our new Director of Operations with Ordinary Men. I am really excited about that for many reasons. Primarily for the organization, but secondarily for me. He is a very detail-oriented type of leader. I am not. So unfortunately, his first couple of weeks have been spent figuring out all the areas that I dropped the ball from logins to why is the YouTube channel linked to a personal account and not the corporate account, to all these things that I just was, we were building the plane in the air and moving as fast as we could. And so it's great to have Alex come on board and really get into the details. And I think he's going to be an unbelievable resource for ordinary men and ordinary women going forward and an integral part of our growth. So Alex, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say a few words and about the new position and any thoughts you may have.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, you guys have been building ship at sea. God gave you the vision to just pour into ordinary men and ordinary women and help them learn what it means to be disciple makers. And so y'all hit the ground running. And my heart really is to come alongside of the vision And right now there's some cleanup, but really we're setting the foundation for something even bigger because we've just begun. We're excited to see how groups grow. We're getting into churches. And, really I'm here as a resource. I have some experience doing some church planting in Central America, in areas that had either no believers, no churches. And then I've been in the States working with small groups as a small groups pastor for the last years, and excited to bring all that knowledge and experience and just bring it into what has already been developed and going with ordinary men and women.
Yeah. Well, when we set out to hire for this position, I didn't think Alex was even an opportunity because he was doing something else. And so I was just talking to him about it, and he was like, hey, I'd like to put my name in the hat. And I was like, well, that's really great. And originally, I thought that the person that should be the right person for the position should be very entrepreneurial, probably not somebody that was a pastor or in the church environment. Not that I have any issue with any of that, just because we just do things a little different. We're a little more grassroots, right? We're ordinary men and ordinary women. And the more that I interviewed Alex and Emily and I interviewed him and such, the more I realized that, man, his skill set he is an entrepreneur. He's a real estate agent under a brokerage that I used to own. And so he has this entrepreneurial spirit with this pastoral spirit, and together I think they really mesh to create a great opportunity for ordinary men and ordinary women, primarily within not only within the church space, because I think there's just a lot of structure that he's going to bring to the table, but also as we try to expand into churches, I always say this, ordinary men and ordinary women is not to be pastor led, it's to be pastor championed. It's to be ordinary men and ordinary women led, but it's to be pastor championed. So Alex is going to help us figure out how can we present this to churches in a way that doesn't feel threatening to the pastor. It feels like we are coming alongside them to help them, to give them a platform, a tool that they can utilize to equip the ordinary men and women in their church to do the work of ministry. And I think together with, kind of my rough around the edges grassroots and his maybe a little more polished ministry side, I think we can really come up with a really nice presentation for pastors across the country that I think will really help us grow. So that's just one of the few things that I'm excited about. There's many, many others, but.
Yeah, no, I can speak to that. I mean, one of the reasons that I first, checked the box and was like, hey, I want to know more, was as a small groups pastor, I was responsible for discipleship in our church. And our church, among many, we struggle to have an effective, simple, intentional discipleship pathway, right? And so when I was looking for that, that's how I got into Ordinary Men, as I realized this is what I wanted to bring into our church setting, where it doesn't depend on me as a pastor to make disciples. Like you said, I just get to be a champion of it. I helped it get going. Now we've got ordinary men who are running with it. And so I think it's going to be huge, because really every church should have a discipleship pathway. The way most church model exists today is you bring in new people, maybe they get saved in the church, but then they kind of get lost in the church. And it could be 10, 20, 30 years where we haven't really taught them what it means to be a disciple and then become a disciple maker. And this all of a sudden is going to shortcut that with an immersion, with giving them really tools to run, and then also our process. It's going to be good.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that I've noticed in church, and this is, Alex and I love the local church. We love the church. So we are about the church. This is not a sideways thing. We are here to help the church. And so one thing that I have noticed, and I think Alex has noticed as well, is a lot of pastors, a lot of churches talk about discipleship, and then it's like, okay, go do it. And then I don't think what they realize is a lot of people in the congregation are like, what do I do? I don't know where to start. And I think Ordinary Men and Ordinary Women is the perfect platform and tool that a pastor can give that gives them the place to start. So that really brings us to what this podcast is about. So we said we had an awesome announcement, right? And so I think an awesome announcement is you coming on as director of operations. But I guess we have two announcements. And the second one is a name change. We're changing the name of Ordinary Men, Inc. I say it like that because I was wanting people to be like, what? You're changing Ordinary Men, Inc.? Yes and no. So when we started out with Ordinary Men, I actually looked it up. It was March of 2019, so a little over 3 years ago. It was Ordinary Men. It was something God put on my heart to lead men in discipleship. Somewhere along the line, about a year after that, Emily Webb came to me and said, hey, I really think we should have ordinary women. And I said, I think you're right. And without saying it to her, I was like, and I think you should lead it. I think you should direct it. Well, the Holy Spirit put that on her heart later on. And certainly she became the director of Ordinary Women. And so now what we have is we have ordinary men and ordinary women, but we have this organization called Ordinary Men, Inc., right? And so when I talk to people, they're like, hey, what do you do? And I'm a director and founder of an organization called Ordinary Men, Inc., or Ordinary Men, I just say. And then the conversation immediately goes into men's ministry, right? It's like discipleship around men and this and that. And then like 30 minutes into the conversation, it's like, oh yeah. And by the way, it's ordinary women as well. Like it's a secondary thought, which it's not, but it comes across as a secondary thought. And by the time ordinary women even gets interjected into the conversation, many times it's so far down the ordinary men road that it's like, it just goes in one ear and out the other. And so I found this real issue with going forward. We can't call these two very distinct groups of men and women. We can't call it ordinary men. And so, so we need a name change. So we went down that path. And that brings us to today. Alex, do you want to tell everyone what the new name is?
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of deliberation, a lot of prayer, a lot of discussion about different names and settling with it and realizing like, what is the vision? What are we really? We came to the conclusion that we are Ordinary Movement, and that allows for both the lane and the tracks for men to do a discipleship movement, but also the women to do a discipleship movement. And Jeremy, maybe you can speak to this, other movements as God brings up.
Yeah. So who knows what future movements come from this or movement. I always want to put an S at the end. Everybody else said, I got voted out. I got outvoted. I said ordinary movements, but everybody said ordinary movement. But I do think it will encompass many. It's the same movement. And what is our movement, Alex?
Listen, we're all about disciples making disciples.
Yeah, it's on my hat today. By the way, you guys, swag, go to our store, theordinarymen.com, and go to our store. This is the Ordinary shirt. You can get the DMD hat. I'm all swagged out. DMD, Disciples Making Disciples. And so every dollar that gets spent at the store, any profit from that goes back to help the organization. But so go buy something. That'd be great. But yeah, we're all about disciples making disciples, and that is the movement. It's a disciple-making movement. And so who knows what that looks like in the future? Hopefully, I don't know. I think Ordinary Discussions is part of a movement, right? It's part of the disciple-making movement. So what it does is it gives us a corporate umbrella to work under, and then anything that falls under the movement of disciple-making, which is what God has put on my heart. I know it's what He's put on your heart, right? That's our mission. That's our vision. Anything that falls under that umbrella now, under that umbrella of disciples making disciples, can be part of the umbrella of Ordinary Movement. And so, it's funny, like the name change. I'm sure people at the beginning were like, what, you're changing the name? No, we're not really. It's still Ordinary Men and it's still Ordinary Women. And I'll still refer to it 90% of the time as Ordinary Men and Ordinary Women. But in the context of giving, in the context of corporate entity structure, in the context of talking to new people about what we do, it allows us to have a conversation that doesn't eliminate one segment of the organization over the other. And it also, I think the movement is really important. We went through many different names, and I'll probably mention some of these, and some people will probably be like, oh, I like that one better. That's fine. But we talked about the ordinary, or just ordinary, or ordinary ministries, ordinary movements. I'm sure there was many others, but
Ordinary Mission was one.
Ordinary Mission
makes sense, right?
It sure does. It sure does. But when it came down to it, we really felt like movement was so descriptive of what we're doing. And if you guys listen to this podcast at all or been around me very often, I describe Ordinary Men and Ordinary Women as a movement quite often, because that's what I think it is. It's a movement. I hate to call it a ministry for this very reason. I think we get the vernacular wrong, and Alex, I'd like for you to speak to this coming from the pastoral side. I think we have the vernacular wrong in the church when we call pastors ministers, right? So the people that are paid, we call ministers. And so immediately what that does is it makes everyone in the congregation think they're there to support the ministers. When in Ephesians, it's very clear to me that pastors are equipped. I'm sure they obviously have ministry, but they are equippers. They're not ministers, they're equippers. So it says they're there to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So who are the ministers, right, in the church? The people doing the work in the ministry should be the people in the congregation. But I think we get the vernacular wrong, and then it makes people look at the pastor and say, oh, he's the minister, I'm just here to support him, versus he's the equipper to equip me to do the work of ministry. So I was really scared to call ordinary movement, I got to get used to saying it, ordinary ministries or ordinary ministry, because I didn't want anyone in our organization to think that they were at all here to support our ministry, because it's quite the opposite. We are here to support your ministry. So when God puts on your heart to make disciples, we're here to support your ministry in that. Your ministry is being a disciple that makes disciples. We are equippers, and we are here to support you in doing that. So I didn't want to give people the wrong impression with ministries, to think that somehow what we are doing is the ministry. No, what we are doing is equipping. What they are doing is the work of the ministry. And so that was important to me.
I think you said it really well. Like, we're here to support your work of ministry, your disciple making. And definitely the way that a lot of church culture and ministry culture, it does look more like one entity, and people support, they attend, they give, and it's that small staff that does everything. And that doesn't look anything like what you see in the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, you see a movement, right, where people, they encountered Jesus, they met him, and they began to live on mission for him and with him. And then they reproduced themselves, they multiplied. And so one of the key factors in being movemental is that there is a multiplication factor in it. There's something scalable, there's something more decentralized. And a lot of people, when they think ministry, they think of, one small organization that gives something to nourish people spiritually. But really our job is to help people learn how to nourish themselves spiritually so that they can then go help others. And so everything for us has that multiplication mindset. And that was why it was a great term for us to use for a ministry name. Yeah.
So in your eyes, Alex, like moving forward, what does the name change really mean for the organization? And does it really affect anything?
I don't think it affects anything. However, it opens doors. Whereas before it was kind of limiting. Like when I would meet somebody and I would say like, hey, I'm a part of Ordinary Men. I felt like I immediately missed out on the opportunity to invite ladies to join us and for them to know. And so I think it allows us to have more accessibility quicker with people who are looking for a discipleship pathway and platform to help them learn how to grapple with making disciples. Does it change any of like how we run Ordinary Men, how we do Ordinary Women? Not at all, but I do believe it's just going to allow us to give even more accessibility to people who have yet to know who we are and what we're about.
Great. And then how do you see the name being used moving forward?
Yeah, I love to already tell people I'm a part of Ordinary Movement. Now, I think you're going to see it's all interchangeable. You might be in an Ordinary Men group or Ordinary Women group, and you can say, hey, I'm doing Ordinary Men or I'm doing Ordinary Women. But I think as you get involved and you have more friends or your spouse or people, that are also a part of these different groups, you're going to find that really it's all one big movement. And that's where you're just going to begin to be a champion of Ordinary Movement, because you want to see everybody running in these different tracks and then working together. And I think on the working together, like you mentioned, we have men, we have women. I know that we've talked about college ministry. We've talked about youth. We've talked about married couples. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities down the road. And so the movement is discipleship. And this just allows us to define it even better and really be one big team.
Yeah, it's great. Well, hey, I want you to speak to something. You can speak to it much better than I. There's a movement, I guess. It's called the DMM, right? Disciple Making Movement. And it's kind of becoming a buzzword among churches and the Christian sphere in general. Wouldn't you say? I mean, it's becoming something quite talked about, DMM, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was interesting because it's actually, it's interesting how Ordinary Men, Ordinary Women, Ordinary Movement has all come together in pieces, but without even knowing it. And this is how it's God breathed and not me making it all up, because I'm just not smart enough to make it happen this way. But I never had this thought of calling it Ordinary Movement. Never even crossed my mind. Yet, if you go to our website, years ago, we put a document on the website which is called, you guys can find it on the website, the National Study on Disciple Making in U.S. Churches. And all throughout that document, it talks about the DMM, which is disciple-making movement. And it talks about movemental organizations in the disciple-making culture. And, that's always been on my heart, this movement thing. But I didn't even realize like how much it was ingrained in my thoughts until we started getting into this process. And as you said, multiplication is at the core of these disciple-making movements. And so can you just speak to that and how you feel like that we are part of a DMM?
Yeah. So I love that this was birthed in you. God gave you this vision for bringing something to the States that would work with people where they're already at. Now, this grapple with discipleship has been ongoing for some time now. And if you go back 2,000 years ago, it was all disciple making movements. But then here we were, both in the States, but especially in missions work. So within the frontier, pioneer missions, how do you go into a place where people have yet to hear of Jesus? There's no established churches, no established leadership. Do you go in and all of a sudden plant a church, put up banners, people will come and then they become Christians? Or they realize that's not going to work. We're going to get killed. We're going to kill people on accident because these are dangerous places. Or do you go in and you say, hey, we're going to focus on making disciples. And you know what? Out of discipleship and disciple making comes the church. And so there was this shift where they realized we need to figure out what works well in the frontier, starting from scratch. The emphasis is going to be on making disciples first. And then from that is what's going to become a church. Now, this doesn't sound novel at all. You're like, well, duh, that's what you read about in Acts. And yet so much of modern day church planting begins with one pastor. And then all of a sudden you lease a building, you do the marketing, you build the staff, you do all of that, you launch and you invite. And so this is actually opposite of that structure and that model. And there's some really neat facets about that, right? So when you go into that context and you're looking at starting that way, I think one of the core values that they have and one of the immediate action steps, which is something I love that we have, is theirs is on extravagant prayer and fasting, because how can you start a movement of disciple making unless God shows up and does something extraordinary in the lives of people? One of our core values is intimacy with Jesus. And so there again is like one common denominator and trait with DMM, and then also ordinary movement as well with disciple making movements. They've got to be scalable. They've got to be decentralized. They've got to focus on multiplication and allowing disciples to make disciples. And it just begins to really run and move and become something bigger than what you can keep up with, because all of a sudden now you've raised up more and more leaders who are raising up leaders. And so I think this is really a lot of our heartbeat is we want to raise up leaders. We want to pour into people. We want to show them how to raise up leaders. That is in discipleship, right? And so it ends up being a really amazing, I think, similarity, that this idea was birthed in you, that God gave you this vision to do this. You had some of these core aspects, and yet you didn't even know about all of the heated conversation about DMM in the frontier missions realm.
Yeah, I knew nothing of it.
And now, on that note, in the States, because we're seeing churches struggle, right? There's the, real issue of consumerism, right? And then there's the issue of dying churches. And then there's the question of, are we really doing discipleship, or are we just giving people a production? And so you're seeing now in the States, this discussion emerging in churches, and especially in groups within churches, of this pursuit of what does it look like to be missional? What does it look like to do micro church or home church or different movements? And these things really shouldn't be a threat to.
All right, guys, sorry about that. We're back with just me and Alex. He's on my phone. Hey, Alex.
All right, I'm here. So
Alex lost Wi-Fi or something, but hey, it's technology and we improvise. So it ain't no big deal. You guys already got to see him. You got to see his pretty face. So we'll finish this way. We're almost done anyhow. Alex, you were saying that it shouldn't be a threat. I'll let you finish that thought and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Exactly. I was saying that as churches go, the really prospect of bringing DMM, disciple-making movements, and I would say that we're one of those movements among many, and that big idea is really this, it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. It's really seeing the people in church go from attending to disciple making. And that's what the church is all about. We've just been so busy, though, trying to keep up and compete with the other churches in town so people don't leave ours to go to the next. And we get so production oriented, whereas now people are craving something that really they get to take ownership in, that they get to take part in, that they get to work in as a team. And ordinary men and ordinary women, that right there are two different movements that let people run and allow them to serve God in this mission to make disciples.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. It's awesome to be part of the DMM movement, disciple making movement. I know we are movemental. God put it on my heart. One of our core values is intimacy with Jesus. Obviously, we know that that's a core of being a disciple making movement. Intentional relationships, it's all about relationship in the disciple-making movement. And then this multiplication piece, which is our other core value, is central to a disciple-making movement. So without even knowing it, we checked all these boxes. Like I look at everything I read about a disciple-making movement, like we've checked every box as a movement. Now we just have to be good stewards of it and make sure that we allow God to move within what the framework that he's helped us create, and that we walk it out the way that he's called us to. And I believe we will. And I think that this name change is part of that. Going from Ordinary Men, Inc., which just doesn't work when you have ordinary men and ordinary women. But we didn't know that when we started this thing out. And so that's okay. We're willing to change. So now we're Ordinary Movement, which encompasses ordinary men and ordinary women. Nothing changes in your study guides. Nothing changes in our core values. Nothing changes in our cultural values. We're all the same. But the thing that changes is we have more clarity to the average person, more clarity even for people within our organization, that we are a movement. We are movemental, right? And that movement is disciples making disciples. And anything that is a disciple-making movement can fall underneath it in the future. And so I'm really excited about what that means for us, Alex, as an organization for ordinary men and ordinary women, and anything else he puts on our heart. But I just, one thing you said, you mentioned, what did you say? That central to these movements is what? Prayer and fasting, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so I really want to encourage everyone listening. If you're part of an ordinary men's group, have been an ordinary movement group, if you have been, if you want to be in the future, if you just has it on your heart, God put it on your heart to just be a prayer partner in that, please reach out to us. We're going to put a link in the description for you to sign up or reach out to be on our bi-weekly prayer call. We'd love for you to be part of that. We need more and more prayer warriors. I say all the time that nothing of eternal significance happens aside from prayer. And so we want to be about prayer. We want to be about prayer and fasting and putting that first in everything we do. And so we'd love to have more partners in that. So if you're listening to this, it's a 30-minute call 2 times a month. It will do more for you than you can even imagine. It's a really special time, just praying with men and women across the country. And we'd love to have you part of that. And so thank you, everyone, for listening. It's exciting for me to even think about when this thing started, it was Ordinary Men, and now we're having to change the name in order to encompass everything that God may put on our heart. And so going forward, Ordinary Movement, you'll hear it. And that doesn't change a thing with ordinary men and ordinary women. It's just this umbrella name, corporate entity. And so, Alex, thanks so much for being part of this. I'm sorry that we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but hey, we got it finished up, right? We should all be used to this. We all survived COVID, right? So we've all had drop calls on Zoom and Google Meet the last few years. Hey, it just adds interest. It just adds interest to our call.
It's real life. It's ordinary life. You're doing podcasts, and we still got tech issues.
I mean, hey, this makes it way more cool because now I don't know. We'll keep saying that. Well, guys, thanks again. As always, thanks for being part of Ordinary Discussions and taking time to listen. And anyone in a group, leading a group, or that wants to be in a group of ordinary men or ordinary women, man, we're just so excited for you and to walk this out together. So until next time, let's do this. See you, Alex.
Go, DMD.
Yeah, baby. See you guys.